Hello, viewers. It's time for makgeolli talk. Time for me to talk with myself about delicious Korean rice wine. And today's topic is the difference between commercial makgeolli and homemade makgeolli. I'm going to cover the difference in ingredients between commercial and homemade, and what I know of the difference in procedure in making commercial makgeolli and homemade makgeolli. And at the end, I'll wrap up with some of the advantages of commercial makgeolli and advantages of homemade makgeolli. The purpose of this channel is to promote rustic Asian rice wine, especially makgeolli. I focused a lot on makgeolli, and I have a new video published every Thursday, and I've been doing this channel for 5 years, and I've been publishing every week, so I have more than 250 videos on the topic of rice wine, recipes, tastings, discussion. So hopefully you find something you like on this channel. And if you like this video, please click that like button, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified of any new videos. And please share this video wherever it is appropriate. If you have any comments or questions, of course, please let me know. So now let's get into the topic, commercial versus homemade. Now, I'm not just making this video to be against commercial makgeolli. I was introduced to makgeolli through just convenience store makgeolli. It's something very common and cheap, and it's mass produced. But I do want to use this time to discuss the differences between what you're going to make at home versus that kind of commercial makgeolli in particular. So even though I enjoyed drinking that, that kind of convenience store makgeolli, it's not the highest level of this product. So it's good to understand the differences and to understand what you're going to make when you make makgeolli at home. Of course, home brewing is going to be a lot different than the commercial product. And to help me understand the differences, first of all, I'm going to talk about the differences in ingredients. And to help me with that, I have my collection of makgeolli labels with ingredients that's going to help me with this first part. So I've saved a number of these labels over the years, and this is going to help me understand. So when you're brewing makgeolli in your kitchen, the ingredients you're going to use are water, rice, probably chapsal, sweet rice, and nuruk, and optionally some yeast. So that's the minimum ingredients for making makgeolli. So let's read the ingredients of some of the commercial makgeolli, and we'll understand some differences here. Okay, so here's Seoul Sangsang makgeolli. Ingredients: water, rice, malto-oligosaccharide, which is some kind of starch or sugar. I'm not sure what it is. In English it says fermented wheat bran, but that's actually nuruk, looking over at the Korean ingredients. And then it says Brewers yeast, and in Korean that's just listed as hyomo, which I guess is like the kind of yeast in a packet. So some kind of brewer's yeast, aspartame, and finally citric acid. Okay, so before I pass judgment on these, I'm going to look at a few more, and we'll see what patterns we see from this. Sang makgeolli from Kuksundang. So this is a bottle that was imported from Korea into the U.S., and so the ingredients are just in English. Ingredients: rice wine, yeast, nuruk, rice juice, water, citric acid, lactic acid, glucose, rice flavors, carbon dioxide. Okay, so that's interesting. Here's another one from Bohei Brewery, Suni makgeolli. Ingredients: rice wine, water, sugar, aspartame in parentheses. So I'm guessing that actually means that sweetener. It's sweetener and then parentheses aspartame. Rice juice, rice flavors, citric acid, and carbon dioxide. And here's another imported one, Idong makgeolli. Ingredients: water, rice, lactate, yeast, aspartame, nuruk, and then in parentheses koji, and purified enzyme. Here's an imported bottle from Pochon Ildong, Sanba makgeolli. Its ingredients are water, white rice, wheat flour, koji, artificial chestnut flavor, Gardenia yellow, purified enzyme, acesulfame, potassium, aspartame, yeast, and lactic acid. Here's a non-imported makgeolli. This is Sangtak makgeolli that I drank in Korea. And here I'm going to translate the ingredient list here for you. But notice that it also includes citric acid and aspartame. And here's pine nut makgeolli, gapyeong makgeolli. And I'll translate the ingredients here. Notice that instead of nuruk, it lists ipguk, is the kind of nuruk that's made with rice, like koji. It also contains aspartame. So these ingredient lists that I read off so far are from the most common mass-produced makgeolli brands. And let's go over some of the things they have in common. What are the differences in these ingredients compared with your homemade ingredients? Well, one difference is that instead of nuruk, often these use koji or ipguk, which is Korean kind of koji, and that's something that's milder than nuruk in flavor. Also, a number of these brands use purified enzymes, or this would be even more concentrated, so they get the job done even faster and better, but of course they don't have any flavor. Another thing that's very common is adding artificial sweeteners. Aspartame, very common at this level of makgeolli. Also, citric acid and lactic acid is often added. So that's a flavor that you should get naturally. You should get lactic acid from lactic acid bacteria. But if you're not doing the traditional brewing, then maybe you don't get that, so you have to add it in for flavor. And also carbon dioxide. Maybe you don't get the carbonation naturally or consistently, so you have to add it. And I noticed that often rice flavors are added. Rice juice or rice flavors are added. And I assume that's because otherwise the commercial brew doesn't have the traditional taste, so they had to add rice flavors back into the brew. Another characteristic is that there's often more yeast than nuruk or koji or ipguk. And that would have to be because they're using a very powerful kind of nuruk or koji that has extra enzymes, or they're using the purified and concentrated enzymes, which will do the saccharification very quickly, but it's not the traditional ingredient. Now, I want to point out, it is possible to find commercial makgeollis with more traditional ingredients. So let's look at some of those now. Here's a takju called ihwa baekju. And so the ingredients here are simply purified water, rice, nuruk, sugar, and some kind of syrup. Okay, so that ingredient list is much more traditional. It still has some additional sweeteners added, so it's not all naturally from the saccharification of the rice, but it's a good sign when you see an ingredient list like this. Here's a famous one called Nurin Mawal. the ingredients here. And the ingredients here are purified water, sal, rice, and then it says gook, which I presume is ipgook. And in parentheses, the two kinds of ipgook are rice ipgook and wheat ipgook. And then yomo, which is yeast. So this is a very pure list of ingredients, nothing extra here. So again, that's pretty much the best case in a list of ingredients. If you see that, that's good. That's a good sign. And then finally, here's a 12% takju hechang makgeolli. And the ingredients are purified water, mepsal, 20%, chapsal, 80%. So that's regular rice and sweet rice. And then again, it has gook, which I presume is ipgook, nuruk, and yomo, yeast. So again, a very good list of ingredients. So it is possible to find commercially made makgeolli with very traditional ingredient lists. Let's talk about differences in procedures, brewing procedures for commercial makgeolli. These are my inferences based on the ingredients and some things I know from outside. Of course, a lot of the actual brewing technology, it's going to be very advanced and proprietary technology. I'm not going to know the details of that, but I do know there are some basic differences with commercial makgeolli, especially the cheaper ones that are artificially sweetened. So commercial brewing is going to involve shortcuts. They're going to want to brew very quickly. The brewing time is likely just a few days, and they get maximum amount of alcohol out of the rice, and it doesn't have good flavor, so they have to add lactic acid to get the right acid balance, and they have to add rice flavor and carbonation to simulate what it would be like with a traditional recipe. Also, they have to do certain things for consistency and scale that aren't necessary or possible for homemade makgeolli. And one of those things is filtering. Obviously, the filtering setup a commercial makgeolli brewer has is going to be different than squeezing it through a plastic filter or a cloth. Their filtering setup is going to be a lot more sophisticated. Another big difference is pasteurization. All the makgeolli that's imported into the U.S. is pasteurized, and that's going to affect the taste somewhat, and it's something you don't have to do at home, especially if you're drinking it quickly. Now, there are some advantages of commercial makgeolli. It is consistent, it's inexpensive, it's produced on such a large scale, and with these shortcuts, it's cheap to produce, and they know how to do it very consistently. And also, the texture is typically very smooth compared with what you get at home is often thicker, and the commercial makgeolli usually has more pleasant texture. And if you seek out higher end makgeolli with that doesn't have the sweeteners, have just the traditional ingredients, you're going to be happier with the taste. Now, of course, I want to cover the advantages of homemade makgeolli. The biggest advantage is that you can be as traditional as you want, and it's still going to be inexpensive. You have complete control over the ingredients. You have a lot more flexibility. You can choose how much you dilute your brew with water. You can influence the texture. You just have a lot more control over the end product. And you're going to have a richer flavor. Even if you use a mild nuruk, that's going to have more flavor than using koji or ipguk. It's going to have more flavor. And, I find that to be a very important part of the end product, having this rich flavor. That's the nuruk flavor is something I'm not trying to avoid. It's something that really gives it a lot of depth in the end. I think there's a lot more that can be added to this discussion. So let me know what you think in the comments. What are the differences between what you expect from commercial makgeolli and what you expect from homemade makgeolli? Let me know in the comments. And thanks, as always. Thank you for watching.